Hi, I'm Armanda Famiglietti. Welcome to Locally Sourced. Where do you look for news about your local community? The New York Times or your local community papers? Well, your local community papers, of course. And tonight I'm very happy to be joined by two local journalists, Brett Freeman and Bob Dumas. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
I'm going to talk a little bit about these folks' background before we start. Let me introduce Brett. Since 2010, Brett has owned Halston Media, publishers of Mahopac News, The Somers Record, Yorktown News, and North Salem News, and tap into those community websites. Before starting Halston, he was an editor with the North Jersey Media Group and currently serves on the board of the directors of the New York Press Association. And Bob Dumas has started as a reporter with the Appalling News Chronicle in the 1980s. He had a successful career as a magazine editor in Los Angeles, where he was the recipient of the prestigious Maggie Award before returning to the Hudson Valley in 2008. He's been reporting and editing for community news outlets ever since, and most recently as the editor of Mahopac News. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you.
So, Brett, why is hyper-local, that's the term, I guess, community news important to our community?
Hyper-local news is very important because, newspapers are very important because there's not really many other outlets you can get real hyper-local news. Certainly we're competing with outlets like Facebook, but in terms of getting reliable news, not rumors, it's really your local community newspaper that has the answers for all of that.
So tell me about Halston Media. What is it? How did you start it? Why did you start it?
Okay, I was an editor of a newspaper in New Jersey, and I didn't see anything up where we are that are real hyper-local sources, hyper-local newspapers.
You live around here?
I live in Carmel. Oh. Yeah, so I saw there's other newspapers here, but they cover the region. They cover Putnam County. They cover northern Westchester. But what makes our newspapers different is that we actually cover a single school district, a single town. So Mahopac News covers the Mahopac School District and the town of Carmel. Then we have the Somers Record, Yorktown News, and North Salem News, and they all cover very hyper-local geographies.
Right. I think we have a banner that shows all of those papers. And you also have something called Tap Into for each one of those counties, right?
Yes, Tap Into is actually it's a company that was started in New Jersey by a gentleman named Mike Shapiro, and he franchises out Tap Into sites to different towns throughout New Jersey, and we're actually the first owners of franchises in New York State. So it's tapinto.net. You can go to tapintomahopac.net, tap into Somers, et cetera, and they're all hyper-local, just like our newspapers.
So you both are reporters. You've been a reporter for many years, Bob. Right. How do you think reporting on local news has changed over the years?
Well, obviously the advent of the internet has had a major impact on news reporting, whether it's national or local. It makes it more intimate, there's more immediacy involved in it, especially most local papers are weeklies. So it used to be if you came out on Thursday and something happened on Wednesday, you'd have to wait an entire week before you read about it. Now we can do things in real time. I think that it's important because, especially in this days where you see more and more local papers fall by the wayside for almost that exact reason, the advent of the internet and social media and things like that, it's left a big hole because I always felt that newspapers are like the watchdog of the town. We're the ones that kind of keep an eye on things for everybody, make sure that the town board, the school board, and what they're up to is kind of brought out into the daylight. And so we still do that. That hasn't changed. And but it's really the internet, I think, that's had the biggest impact.
I would actually say that we actually have a closer relationship also to our readers now because of social media.
Oh, yeah.
And even that tragic murder in Mahopac, I believe we first heard about it just through a rumor on Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's when we started looking into it. When you started calling your sources over there.
Right. We can interact with our readers, in real time and get tips from them or feedback from them, almost immediately, and that helps us. When I started this career, there was no internet, and I tried to think back on how we did it back then. If we wanted to find a source, we couldn't Google something. And I can't remember how we even did it back in the 80s. Things have changed.
Right. Yeah, I'm amazed at how quickly I'll get an alert on my cell phone telling me that something has happened. Now, sometimes it's just a headline, like when there was a murder in Mahopac, woman found dead, looks like it's murder, more to come. But it was like within hours of that woman being discovered. And I thought, so you folks must work day and night because...
we can constantly give you updates as the story progresses. Breaking news, it hits people's tablets, cell phones,
right.
And then as more information is made available to us, we just keep feeding it out there,
Right.
So that's obviously a big change than the good old days.
The good old days.
Yeah.
So also I noticed that on your website, you invite the public to contact you. And so I assume like you say, you see Facebook, but you're also getting members of the community telling you what's going on, so you can then share it through your news outlet, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, well,
is that a little different from how it used to be? Yeah.
I mean, we would get some of that in the good old days, people calling me on the telephone or stopping in the office, but now they can do it through emails, texts, things like that. We still do some stuff the old-fashioned way. We attend meetings and stories come out of that, but a lot of people ask me all the time, wow, where do you get the ideas for these stories? Well, people say, hey, I know a guy who ... and we make a few phone calls and, hey, yeah, this is a pretty cool story. And people reaching out to us, making suggestions. They're not always going to pan out, but, oftentimes they do. And they turn out to be some awesome stories sometimes. Yeah.
Now, do the stories that appear online and the stories that appear in the weekly paper, is the weekly paper a little more fleshed out, or are the stories identical, or how does that work?
Well, I would say our weekly newspaper, one area where we stand out, it's a type of paper that people want to cut things out. They want to put it up on their refrigerator because we have a whole page or 2 pages of photos from a local event, an Easter egg hunt, a sporting event. So we take pride in the large photos, the large color photos that we put in our paper. So that's one area where the internet and the paper are different. The website actually gives us an opportunity. Let's say we publish 10 photos in our paper, we can publish 20 photos on the website, which is nice. I know that you Bob, I guess use it also for different ways as well in terms of breaking news.
Yeah, obviously, like the murder we just talked about. Rather than wait 6 days, we could put that up as breaking news. It alerts everybody on their cell phone. We like to, people get the newspaper, boom, it's right there, all in one fell swoop. With the internet, we kind of like to feed stuff on there onto our website piecemeal, so that there's a story. So to keep the website fresh, there's a new story every day. We don't put everything that's in the newspaper up there, but all the major stuff, all the sports, our columnists, they're all up there. But the smaller stories, probably not, just because we don't want to over-cluttered, but mostly it's to deal with breaking news and the story of the day, So it's a companion. They feed off each other. We just had a meeting a couple weeks ago with some of our ad people about, the role of the website. And, a lot of newspaper companies have fallen by the wayside because of the advent of internet news. We seem to be making it work, go hand in hand, and finding out a lot of our readers prefer the newspaper, which is kind of counterintuitive of what you might think in 2017. But right, Brett, a lot of people love the paper,
Not only certainly people love the paper, and you know, it's not just, I mean, there's, I guess, a reputation that newspapers, it's senior citizens reading it. It's not just senior citizens, it's also, you know, parents of young kids, and it's also kids themselves. I know that, you know, high school kids, without a doubt, I've heard stories where, you know, kids are running to the mailbox just to see, you know if their friends are in the paper, if they made it in the paper, and they're in the sport that they're in. So it's definitely popular among kids and teens as well.
Right.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that they run to the mailbox. That's a little different model, isn't it? That you mail your paper. I see several local newspapers that are free at the grocery store or in little boxes on the sidewalk, but that's not true for Mahopac News, is it?
We have free requester papers, which means that the vast majority of our papers are requested, and they are mailed. So you know, we have actually between our 4 papers over 17,000
postal customers.
Over 17,000 of people that actually requested the papers, and you know, they actually mail in a little postcard with their address and saying yes, they want the paper. So.
Do you have it free and available anywhere other than libraries?
We do a limited drop-off in library, town hall, couple, you know, delis, but really we want people to request it and for it to for them to get it in the mailbox.
Right, and that's a good way to track, I guess, who's picking it up and who's reading it, right?
Absolutely.
Because you have that connection with your readership, do you tailor the information in your newspaper to try to engage the community? I mean, are you sort of like in tune with what people want to read about? You mentioned local sports. I noticed Mahopac News, which is the one I look at, has a lot of local sports coverage.
Well, I would say actually, I think Facebook is a useful tool in terms of that, and also just Google Analytics in terms of what we put on our website. Is certainly, and what we put on Facebook, we certainly can get immediate feedback in terms of what is interesting people. I know you have, you know, a couple recent stories that got, you know, thousands of views on, maybe 10,000, 20,000 views on Facebook.
Yeah, we keep track of that. You know, I don't think it dictates, you know, what we're going to cover, you know, but because we've both been doing this a long time, so, I mean, you kind of know what news is and what our responsibilities are and the information that people are going to need. But outside of that, you know, it just, you know, sometimes we'll be amazed. We'll look at our Facebook data and go, holy cow, you know, look at the, you know, like the expression we like to use is we just blew up the internet, you know. And sometimes things that we think are going to blow up the internet, you know, crickets chirping, you know. And so, you know, I always think, you know, this is going to be controversial. We're going to, you know, phone's going to ring off a hook, and then nothing happens. And then sometimes it's completely opposite. You know, I think it's a sleepy little story, and the next thing you know, it blows up. So, you know, been doing this 30 years, and I still haven't figured that out yet. So, you know.
Well, hang in there, Bob.
Yeah, I'll keep trying. You know.
just keep trying. Talking a little broader about the journalism in general. I was wondering if you foresaw the end of the newspaper, if we're going to go to completely electronic online news. But it sounds like at the community level, you're saying you don't see any sign that people want to give up the newspaper.
Well, not only is it just readers who don't want to give up the newspaper, but our advertisers don't want to give up the newspaper either. And I would say 99% of our revenue is through the newspaper. And 1% or less is on our websites.
Oh, really? Okay.
So yeah, I mean, our readers, I mean, in part because our advertisers, they like to know that their ad is being seen in 25,000 mailboxes, so that there's a certainty for them that they're going to get the eyeballs that they want.
And that's the thing, we have such a good relationship with our advertisers. They believe in us. They support us, you know, even if they feel they don't have to, they support us. I find that in the communities where the newspaper die, they don't have that same sort of symbiotic relationship with their business community, and we do, you know. We are out there, we're a part of the communities that we work in. We have a presence, we're everywhere, you know, and I think that's one of the keys to our success. You know.
Another more general question. Definitely since the beginning of this year, we've heard a lot about you can't really trust journalism. It's a lot of fake news. It's alternate facts. Even, the New York Times, all the news that's fit to print has been, called, just a lot of lying. What are people meant to think when they hear this? Can we trust journalism at all levels? What are your thoughts about that?
I would say that everybody has a worldview. And I think as long as a newspaper attempts to be objective, I don't think any human being is capable of being 100% objective. I mean, we've all lived our lives a certain way. We all see things a certain way. So I think the challenge is sort of challenge yourself to look outside your own viewpoint, see a perspective that maybe someone else sees that you don't see. And I would say our newsroom does an excellent job of that. And I would say there's definitely within our own newsroom, we have debates on a regular basis about different topics, and we certainly all challenge each other. I would say.
Right, and I think that's an issue more like on the world or national scene. And I think sometimes people get confused with the terms fake news and biased or slanted news. They're different things. Fake news is something that's made up out of whole cloth. It's fiction.
It's just completely inaccurate.
It's not only inaccurate, it didn't exist to start with.
I think of the news story about the pizza parlor.
That's a good example of something that was just totally made up out of nothing. Slanted
but it
news
cost someone their life.
It's dangerous. But slanted news or biased news is something that's about something real. It's just written or broadcast in a way that gives it a slant, left or right or whatever. Sometimes it's done intentionally. Sometimes it's just subconscious. I think more on a local level, grassroots level, that doesn't really come into play as much. A little bit.
So we can trust you guys.
Well, cultivating sources and networking is important. And if somebody, in a small town like the ones we work in, find out that you're doing something like that, you're going to lose your trust, you're going to lose your sources and your reputation, and can't afford that in this day and age.
Right.
So,
I should just go back a little, just in case people don't remember the pizza parlor story. I think it was last year in 2016 that some independent news service said that there was a child abuse ring happening at the back of a pizza parlor somewhere.
It was in Washington, D.C.
In Washington, D.C.
And run by Hillary Clinton. In the basement of a pizza parlor, running a sex slave ring.
And someone...
This pizza parlor didn't even have a basement, by the way.
It was reported, and some person who had a large gun wanted to go and stop it, and ended up charging into the pizza parlor, scaring everybody to death. And I think the gunman was killed, or he killed someone in the pizza parlor.
I don't think he was killed, but I think he was arrested. I'm not sure he was shot. But that was headed off at the pass before he could do any real damage.
So that's an extreme example.
That's an extreme example
of inaccurate and just totally wrong, as opposed to something that's got a bias.
That was, like I said, made up versus bias.
Well, I'm glad. The sense I get is that we can trust our community newspapers.
We're not infallible. We can make a mistake, but it's usually an honest mistake, and we'll correct it.
We'll also have people sometimes call us up and say, "Why didn't you get this? Why didn't you publish this?" And oftentimes we can't just publish something without checking your sources, verifying, getting a statement from the police department. Et cetera, et cetera. We can't just publish rumors as well.
Often we'll hear stuff. People call us up and tell us stuff, and we kind of know it's true, but we can't write it or publish it until we get it from a verified source.
And that's where the reporting comes in. You have to actually call sources and dig things up. And
and attribute everything to where we're getting our information from. That it's a reliable source. Or if it's an anonymous source, hopefully get it from two of them. If you get two anonymous sources, then we don't like to use them. But in a certain case, you can. A lot of it's intuition, but most of the time you want a good, reliable source, police, a district attorney, a lawyer, somebody like that, in the case of crime or something like that, or, a town official, if it's about something to do with town policy or something like that.
Bob, you mentioned, and I mentioned, that you've been a reporter for many years, since the 80s. What's the most memorable story that you've written about in your career?
Well, there's been several. When I first started, I'm originally from Pauling up in Dutchess County, and had the privilege of working on my hometown newspaper back in the mid-'80s, and was
You were just a child.
Yeah, I was in my 20s and got promoted to managing editor. Now, the paper covered not just Pauling, but a lot of surrounding communities, including Dover, Wingdale, which is just north of that. And that's where the old Harlem Valley Psychiatric Center used to be. And in the 80s, they were converting that to something called a DFY, Division for Youth, which is basically part of the Department of Corrections, where they would send kids who committed felonies before they were 18. They were incarcerated there. And when I first graduated college, I got a job there while I was looking for something in journalism. So when I left there, a lot of people knew me and knew I was at the newspaper. And I started getting these phone calls that there was a lot of weird stuff going on up there.
Anonymous phone calls?
Well, no, they would say, "Hey, this is Jerry. We remember when we worked together." They'd tell me who they are, and they said, there was allegations of sexual liaisons between staff and the kids, and drug running up from the Bronx by staff to the kids, and all kinds of nefarious things. And I started meeting these people who were smuggling documents out late at night at diners and at train stations, and doing these interviews. And we ended up running a 4-part series.
Deep Throat.
Yes, it was just like that, except we were in diners at midnight drinking coffee instead of in a parking garage. But we did a 4-part series on this, pretty in-depth reporting. It was very exciting for somebody, because Watergate was actually my impetus to go into journalism. Wow. It was my inspiration. So I'm like, holy cow, here I am kind of doing it again. Anyway, our articles resulted in an investigation by the State Attorney General's office, and a lot of people lost their jobs up there. And
so the allegations were true.
Yeah, the whole thing.
A mess.
Yep, they found their subsequent investigations backed up what we were being told. So. Then, of course, a few years ago, I was working for one of those digital platforms, the Daily Voice, down in Lewisboro and Pound Ridge, and that was when Sandy hit. And so covering that, for about 7 or 8 days without the power and stuff, and as everybody knows who's been down there, that's a very foresty area, a lot of trees, a lot of old growth, and just trying to get around, you couldn't even get in, And so I had to work from home a lot there, and I remember trees tipped over in the front yard of the town hall, who were as wide as I were tall, and they were just crushed like twigs. And so covering that was very eventful. And then on a more tragic, probably the most saddest, profound story I ever covered was in Lewisboro back in 2012, was the murder-suicide in the Freelander family. A lot of people might remember that, where a father murdered his wife and 2 young children as they slept, and then committed suicide. And that was Lewisboro's a small town, and that just blew up and reverberated throughout the town for, I'm sure, here we are 5 years later, they're still feeling that. So those are probably the most memorable stories that I've done. So.
And you recently won an award, did I hear, from the New York Press Association?
Yeah, it was honorable mention for a feature story we did. I interviewed a bartender at a restaurant in Mahopac called Il Ghetto. It's right on Lake Mahopac, and one day she looked out the window from her bartender station and saw a kayak that had capsized and had an 8-year-old boy who was drowning. And she just went out on the deck of the restaurant and dove in fully clothed, and was able to rescue the boy and bring him into shore. It was cold, so hypothermia was an issue, but she did it. And we did an interview. I was really surprised at one. We submitted a lot of stuff, and I, you never know with awards, but it was nice, and they appreciated the writing and the insight that the story revealed. So, from the point of view of the rescuer, rather than just a basic kind of news story,
That's
so.
a great story, and it's a great restaurant.
and
and you guys have been great guests, so I want to thank you. We're just about out of time. Before we go, let me just ask you, is there one big story you're working on to kind of pique our interest before we...
Well, obviously the biggest one we just did is the murder. We don't get murders in Mahopac very often. I think they
Thank
told
God.
me the last one was 5 or 6 years ago. So yeah, that was big, but that's all wrapped up now. Right now we're in the middle of school board election budget time, so I'm in the middle. There's a big school board election coming up next week in Mahopac, 6 candidates after 3 seats, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
of course, the budget and
Bob, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because
no
we're
problem.
out of time. So I want to thank you,
Thank
Brett
you very, very
Freeman
much.
and Bob Dumas, for coming on the show. And of course, I want to thank the crew, the volunteer crew here at Comcast and everyone who works here, and just say thanks for tuning in, and till next time.